Hello everyone, this is Al coming to you from Kindred Souls of Brooklyn. I'd like to thank you for tuning in, and just wanted to do a quick video on Jim Morrison and the Doors. And it's actually the Doors. Jim Morrison never really liked it when they said Jim Morrison and the Doors. It was always the Doors. So I wanted to do this video on Jim Morrison's last song that he ever recorded. And a lot of people are never too sure about this, but it's actually the song that you're listening to. It's called Riders on the Storm. And of course it comes from the popular album that they produced. And it's called LA Woman. LA Woman was their 6th album. And it was the last time that Jim Morrison sang on planet Earth, as far as people know. So the story went that Jim Morrison kind of put a lot of years into his 6 years of activity. He was a heavy drinker. People found out later on that he was allergic to alcohol and caused him to do some crazy things. Along with that, he was known to take some drugs. So a little bit about Riders on the Storm. Riders on the Storm came from the LA Woman album, as I said. And it was kind of interesting because that album was the last album that the Doors really needed to produce. Their contract with Elektra was finished, and Jim Morrison was in the midst of a trial. He was in that famous Miami concert where he was arrested, and he was facing some hard labor if he was convicted. So he said to his bandmates that, I think I'm going to go to Paris. He let them finish up all the mixes on the LA Woman album. There was a couple of mixes left to go. And the band members really didn't think too much of it. They thought it was a great idea for Jim to go to Paris because he was a poet. And in fact, that's the house that he lived at, the apartment in Paris. I want to tell you that's another view of the apartment that he lived at in Paris. Some of these flicks coming up. The Doors came from Venice Beach, California. So that's Venice Beach. They spent a lot of time there. If you go there today, you can still see some of these images with Jim Morrison's portrait on the wall, that one right there. But Jim Morrison was originally born in Melbourne, Florida. And as he says, at one of his concerts, he got smart and he moved to California. But Jim was an icon and frontman of the Doors. Pamela Corson, who never formally married Jim. She ended up dying in 1974 of a heroin overdose. Jim, of course, himself, there's a lot of controversy surrounding his death. But there's conflicting thoughts as to how he died, but all seem to agree that it was of an overdose. That's Jim bringing a lamb on stage, one of his concerts. That's an early Jim Morrison photo right there. As he got older, he started drinking heavily. That's his gravesite in the famous cemetery Père Lachaise in France. It's actually the 3rd most visited thing in Paris, behind the Eiffel Tower and Disneyland, Paris. And I don't think the French are too happy about that, but nonetheless, they've embraced it as best as they can. Père Lachaise is actually a very small cemetery, but there's a lot of famous people buried there. I know Chopin is buried there, and a lot of the famous writers that Jim loved to read and loved to recite. And it's kind of funny that, Jim, there's always rumors around his death, but as he would always say, he would come in with a quote, and he would say, rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated, which actually was a Mark Twain quote. So, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this video. But yeah, Riders on the Storm was Jim's last song that he ever sung on planet Earth. And that whisper he does at the end, Riders on the Storm. As far as people know, that's the last time he ever sang on planet Earth. And fascinating group, very popular commercially. So folks, hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe, drop me a comment. And as Jim would say, this is the end. Good night, folks. Good night from Brooklyn. Bye-bye now.